heard about some impacts to key wildlife species, and now we're going to circle back and talk about an idea for how to mitigate some of those impacts through avoidance. This is an idea that's proposed by scientists at the Nature Conservancy to mitigate through siting. Holly Copeland is a spatial ecologist and conservation scientist with the Wyoming chapter of the Nature Conservancy. She'll be talking about TNC's development by design ideas. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me and for putting on this wonderful conversation about such an important topic in our state. All right, last talk of the session. I'm sort of wowed and exhausted by all the information, so I hope to keep it fresh and then get you all to your break. So we've heard a lot about a lot of conversation about smart siting and macro scale siting, and as was discussed yesterday in the forum, the Millward led some reference to data that are available for the state on smart siting. And so I'm hoping to dive today into some specific data sets that are already available, studies that have already shown how we might site wind more to avoid wildlife impacts, and put a little color on some of the discussion that's already occurred. So I just want to say up front that the Nature Conservancy recognizes that climate change threatens many aspects of life on Earth, and that moving towards a clean energy future is really key to reducing climate emissions. And I really appreciate the lead-off presentation by Ember to set that stage. So really a critically important issue. And of course, as has been discussed, of course, improperly sited wind facilities have a lot of threats to wildlife populations, as has been covered by the previous speakers. And so finding this nexus between where we can site wind properly and minimize impacts is just such an important issue. So let me give you some of the information that we already have. The other thing that I want to sort of remind us is that I'm going to show you some data on energy sprawl in the United States and increasing land disturbance that's expected. And as that disturbance continues across Wyoming, I think that the value of our open spaces is only going to increase. The value of these lands for recreation, for tourism, for hunting, for all the values that we cherish as Wyomingites. And so taking Senator Case's statements really to heart, this is an imperative that we think very carefully about where this new development goes. How do we do that? What tools are already available? The state an idea for a comprehensive state plan has been brought up, and so is that possible? We do have a lot of data already, so let's talk about what some data is available. As has been really well covered by others, these wind energy facilities have very large-scale impacts and use up a lot of land area. Just an interesting graphic I came across in the height comparison of wind turbines to some other features. The biggest ones that we have now are really exceed a lot of other structures on the landscape. And the footings required, the roads required are quite intense. A hypothetical 80-turbine wind energy facility uses a relatively small physical footprint of facilities and roads, but the land area required for that facility when we encompass the entire project area, and I'm using a number here of 200 acres per turbine that Crystal McCullough came up with, and Ken Lay looking at the area of that project is much greater. And then, as been mentioned today, the ecological footprint when we incorporate migrating species, eagles from Canada, ungulates, is potentially much larger. So this was discussed yesterday by Dr. Godby. The currently installed amount of wind in the state, about 1,500 megawatts, proposed about 8,000, about 5 times what we currently have. I developed this graphic just to illustrate how much land area that is relative to the state of Wyoming. So that, again, this is just hypothetical, but the wind energy obviously isn't in the blue box, but that's about how much land area we're taking up by current wind energy development using that 200 acres per turbine figure. And this dark blue box here would be the amount of land area we'd be taking up if we built out all of those 8,000 megawatts that are expected to be developed. So pretty large land area. This paper by Ann Trainer and colleagues at the Nature Conservancy looked at energy sprawl in the United States and the future of energy sprawl in the United States. And they calculated that the amount of area, I know you can't read that because I can't read it either, but I'll tell you what it says because I memorized it. The amount of land area that's expected to be developed from future energy resources in the United States is about the size of Texas. So it's a pretty large land area. And that the pace of that development is twice what has occurred from urban and residential development. So we think about urban and residential development as being really large drivers of land use change in the United States, and they are. But this pace of energy development is expected to be double that. This figure is from that study, and I'll draw your attention to the right-hand side of that graph. This figure looks at the landscape level impact and compares them for various types of energy sources. And biomass is the largest landscape level impact. They're at 809 kilometers squared per terawatt hour, but wind is second at 126 kilometers squared per terawatt hour. So compare that to solar photovoltaic at 15, and you can see that it really does use a large amount of land area compared to some other types of energy. So where we site it becomes critically important. And it has been really well covered by the other talks this morning, but of course birds are a huge concern. I ran the calculation that Erickson et al. Had on number of small passerine birds per megawatt per year, and if they're correct, we're already killing about 5,000 passerine birds per year in Wyoming. Stone to displace grassland birds, sage grouse, and I apologize, Chad, I said selection impact on nesting, and you showed this morning that was not the case, so I apologize. But on summer and brooding habitat, eagles, bats. So a lot of expected species impacts. So how can we deal with those? The Nature Conservancy has been applying and using the mitigation hierarchy for well over 10 years now, and they developed this report to try to capture some of those ideas succinctly. A lot of them have been covered this morning. But I do think that it provides a really important framework to think about, first trying to avoid those impacts and then minimizing them and then offsetting. And I think it's very exciting to see all the work that especially that Amanda covered this morning and Tabor about how we might minimize those impacts through some of the acoustic technologies that you shared and others. So I think it's really exciting to see, but the mitigation hierarchy also says that the best thing you can do is try to avoid those impacts first and foremost. And as was referenced yesterday, we've done some work in Mongolia, trying to avoid impacts to mining and oil and gas development there. And the strategy used in Mongolia was to work with the state to try to identify areas that were really for conservation and then have other areas that are more intensive land use. This is citing options and some of the data that we already have. So Joe Kiesecker, here are some papers that talk about macro scale siting, and Joe Kiesecker in 2011 published a paper trying to say, if we generated wind development on just our disturbed lands, could we meet our US DOE goals? And their answer there was actually, that he found was yes, we could, that there were plenty of disturbed lands already available in the United States that we could meet those goals. So here's a map of disturbed lands for the state of Wyoming. So the red and the pink areas are the more disturbed areas. So the idea here would be, can we try to steer development towards those red and pink areas, the areas that are already have other types of disturbance on them. So we have this type of data available to the state that we could use in some kind of a comprehensive plan. And then Amy Posowitz and I and colleagues at the Wyoming Natural Diversity Database published a paper in 2013 trying to look at bird migratory stopovers and how that intersected with wind development. We grouped birds into 4 different categories of raptors, riparian birds, wetland, and sparse grassland birds. And then asked the question, how much exposure do these different bird guilds have to future wind development? Here's our model of raptor movement concentration. Here's our model of sparse grassland birds, and I'm not going to take the time to go into the methodological details of these, but we use these maps in order to, and then the high wind potential areas, including proximity to transmission lines. And in that study, we found that if you took those highest 40% of wind potential areas and the highest 40% of the migratory concentration areas for all of those bird guilds, there was 73% of overlap between them. So unfortunately, this model shows, the study shows that there really is a lot of overlap between our important bird resources and our great places for wind development. So we have a lot of careful thinking to do if we're going to try to reduce those impacts to birds. And then this map, the Game and Fish created, and as I understand, the Game and Fish is currently using this map when they are consulted by the ISC for approving projects. This map combines the pink areas there are sensitive areas for wildlife. The orange are highly sensitive areas for wildlife, and I think the orange in this map are mostly driven by sage-grouse core areas. And then the green areas are where they're proposing that there's minimal wildlife conflicts. So they're already using a map like this to try to comment on projects. And then we have new wildlife data that are emerging daily from the plethora of GPS technology. And as costs for GPS technology go down and interest in it, we have those data available to us as well. For example, the Wyoming Migration Initiative has made an incredible attempt incredible project on with the Game and Fish to collar pronghorn, mule deer, elk, and provide those data to the public for planning purposes. So here's a map of all the different studies that they and Game and Fish have ongoing on migratory ungulate. Some of them are nomadic as well, but ungulate populations in Wyoming. So we can use these data to help try to steer future development away from places that we know are important for migrating ungulates. Here's an example of a map on fall migration for eagles that has just come out, and it's in review in PLOS 1. This is effort from the Teton Raptor Center, Raptor View Research Institute, Alaska Fish and Game, and Lone Pine Analytics. So as these new data emerge from telemetry data on eagles, we can really start to hone in on some of the important places that eagles are using, and I appreciate Tabor's great presentation on impacts to eagles. So these data are key to helping us understand where to plan away from eagle areas. Our partners are colleagues for the Nature Conservancy in Kansas and Oklahoma have an effort they call Site It Right. And on this project, they have been trying to combine key wildlife data with key transmission or key data sets for wind development and try to put those together in a low conflict risk mapping exercise. So I only have a couple minutes, but I'm just going to kind of give you the highlights of this. So they identified and mapped key wildlife areas for species important for them, like whooping crane, bald eagles, bat caves, other T&E species, put all these together into a map for wildlife. And then they looked at potential restrictions. These are places where you couldn't put wind development because of airfields or airspace, NEXRAD stations, and basically said, okay, we know wind development can't go here, so let's put all that on a map. There's a lot of them. And here's the result. So these areas in green are the places where you are avoiding all those wildlife conflicts and you are technically feasible from a wind point of view. You've met you're in a high, windy place, and you don't have other air type of restrictions. Here's a map that shows those same areas in green. Now I've colored them by wind speed. And here are the existing wind turbine facilities in those states. So you can see actually that there are quite a few of them that are already in these low risk areas, a few that aren't. But they're using this tool, and they've made it available on a website, the Central Plains Low Risk Wind Tool, and are working with developers to try to encourage and incentivize development in these green areas. This is something that they actually have interest in developing this tool for the entire Great Plains, and they've approached us at the Wyoming chapter of the Nature Conservancy to ask if we could help them build out a map like this for the state of Wyoming. So this is something that we're in conversation with them about doing. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other types of minimization that I haven't touched on that are really, really important. But this macro siting is something that I think we have the data to do, and we can certainly try to do that and make it available on public forums. So to summarize, energy sprawl is a real concern, and footprint of wind development is high. Analyses that have been done support that there is room to develop on existing disturbed lands. Wyoming has world-class wildlife resources and open spaces, and we already have some maps that can drive smart siting tools. And additionally, new data, wildlife data, are available and emerging to develop these lower risk maps, so we can certainly build them. And I'll leave you with a question that I had when pulling all this together, understanding that there are a lot of proposed projects already on the table that are well down the road, and the question that I have is what opportunity exists to influence siting of future development with these proposed projects in mind? Is there an opportunity? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe there isn't there, but I'll bet there's. It looks as though there is quite a bit of wind development that we can expect even beyond that into the future. So can we influence siting of that development as well? And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you. Very interesting talk. I quite enjoyed it. I'm Steve Williams. I'm a retired soils professor at the University of Wyoming. I think one of the opportunities, if you will, that you might have is using more to mesoscale soil characterizations to help with siting also. Mainly because there's some sites where you probably should not put a wind turbine due to the soil characteristics and the potential for those characteristics to influence reclamation. But so I'm asking the question really, is anybody using a soil characterization for siting?
Great question. I am not aware of anybody that's using that, but there are people here in the room who are much more familiar with specific siting, and so if somebody else knows the answer to that, if soil characteristics are being used, please speak up.
I think I know the answer.
Well, you raise an interesting point, and in that potential restrictions list, if we were to go down that road of trying to compile restrictions, maybe there's a opportunity to include that. Thank you.
Holly, thank you for that great information. Really helpful. I'm wondering, the migration study that you folks conducted, did you also look at breeding areas of raptors and passerines, or was it just migration?
Thanks, Andrea. There is a breeding map as well. So I was just showing you the fall migration map, but they do have a breeding map and a summer map as well.
Going back to that migration map, you notice that there was a big gap in southeast Wyoming on that map. understand there are migration corridors in there. They aren't well documented, they aren't well known yet at this time. All the emphasis pretty much going to the western part of the state. So we have a lot of interesting things going on down here. You go south in Larimer County, Colorado, a lot of data down there, but it stops at the border for the most part. So we have some fun things going on just east of us.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. And I should have clarified that the data that I was showing on that Eagle map was, I was just showing you the data for that Southwest Wyoming study. So I was not trying to imply in showing you that map that there weren't data available. There could actually be migration maps for eastern Wyoming, but I was just showing you that specific study.
Have you compiled a database of all the proposed wind projects in Wyoming, public and private lands, so that the people can be informed as to what is proposed?
I've seen a couple different versions of that. The USGS has long had kind of a proposed wind projects map, and then Crystal McCullough has put together a list of proposed wind projects as well, and I believe she has that mapped. I'm sort of looking at Ken, looking for a nod if that's the case. So I'm aware of two, but the USGS one is publicly available, but I'm not sure how current it is. The one I had was from 2013, and yeah, you want to comment?
I would just say it's actually a very good question, and this is one of the issues that we sort of touched on yesterday. There needs to be a lot more transparency in all of this, because there's publicly available information that Crystal and others have used to compile lists of pending projects, but there are lots of other times when confidentiality prevails, and there may be proposals that are pending at the PSC or something like that, but for various reasons are not considered to be disclosable.
With that, please help me in thanking Holly for that.